Hey guys, welcome back to the shop. Today I'm going to get back on the MGB. Kind of. So this here is the subframe out of a slightly earlier B. It should all work for mine because the difference between these is basically chrome bumper versus rubber bumper. And this is a chrome bumper and mine's a chrome bumper. I know this is earlier than mine because it has this little tow hook right here. They stopped doing that in the late 60s or sometime around. But the plan is I've got a whole new polyurethane bushing kit that I'm going to stick in that I bought for my car. But then I picked this guy up. So basically what I'm going to do is I'm going to rebuild this entire cross member. And then we're going to just simply throw this underneath, and so I can just do the swap in about a day, and I don't have to worry about taking everything apart. The other thing is that when I do that, I can paint this and make everything nice and clean and shiny. So that's what I'm going to do. So for this first video, I'm pretty much just going to strip this guy down, get it down to all its basic components. And then later we're going to talk about rebuilding each of them individually. But yeah, let's start by, well, stripping it down. And I'm going to start by taking the brake calipers off. Really it's brake calipers and steering rack. Those are the first things to go. So brake calipers. This is all apart. I don't really need too much of this, but basically I'm going to take off these brake lines. And most things on this are going to just be normal imperial. Some things may be a Whitworth size, but there's usually something close enough you can use. As far as tools that you're going to need, pretty much all you need is a set of sockets and wrenches from about 7/16 up to maybe 3/4. This guy should be 9/16. And yeah, that screw was just the closest thing. Yeah. I don't know how, but there's still brake fluid in this. Got this from a friend and it's been sitting around for years. Okay, so now I'm going to just unbolt the caliper. This little tab right here should be folded over against one of those flats. You just got to hammer it out, but that's been undone for a very long time. And I'm just going to take our 5/8 impact, buzz that off, and the caliper comes off. Now that I got the calipers off, it's time to focus on the steering rack. And we're going to start with the ball joints. There are many ways to do this, but I'm going to show you my favorite way, which is the big ass hammer. So the first thing we're going to do is just buzz that off. Make sure it's hand tight. That's going to be true with every method. You could use a pickle fork, slip it in there, smack it real good, try to get it to pop. You can use one of those little fingery press things, but the pickle fork will ruin the ball joint if you care about the ball joint. And the little pressy things, I've just never had them work well. So, big ass hammer. So with this guy loose, we're just going to hit on the spindle right here. What that's going to, or not the spindle, this piece, little steering arm. What that's going to do is shock it, and that's going to cause the tapered press fit of the ball joint to just pop out. It may take a few hits, and they do have to be pretty strong ones. There we go. So that was like, I don't know, 7 or so. Now I just gotta do the other side. Alright, so now we just pull that out. And now we've got to remove the rack. This should be nice and easy. 1/2-inch ratchet. Quarter drive, deep well, right there. It just about fits under your radiator in the car. But yeah. And also, yeah, if you don't know, things have a steering rack. American cars did not have a steering rack when this thing was made. The English have been doing that since the 50s. But, this basically stayed until 1980, and it didn't even have ball joints. It still ran kingpins. So you take what you can get. All right, this should just pull off. That's kind of stuck. So take a little. It's a lot more stuck than I thought. All right. And this guy should be, this bolt that comes in from the bottom, there's a little flat tab that keeps this from rotating. So if you can rotate this, something is wrong. And that's fine. You can usually jam a screwdriver in there to keep it, but you're better off not stripping that out. Alright, will this one come? That one comes. Alright, so maybe I can kind of flex this, wiggle it, and then it'll pop out. It does seem like that is still seized into the steering rack. I'm also going to get some boots. Burning grease and rubber. Always do this in a well-ventilated area. A little bit of WD. Oh! It's moving! Finally. Steering rack gone. One other thing to note is you see these little shims right here. They get riveted there and there. And what they do is help align the steering rack, because the steering rack needs to be perfectly in line with the steering shaft and not have any weird binding. So when you put this in the car, you basically mount the steering rack and then you let it just sit and kind of rest here. If you tighten it down with no shims, odds are it's going to twist the steering rack in some way, and it's going to bind up and just feel terrible. So what you do is you slip some, well really you just slip some shims underneath, take up the gap, then you screw it down, and then it should be perfect, super light steering, everything you expect out of an MGB. But yeah, that's what those shims are for, so don't lose them. Okay, now we're going to start taking apart the kingpins. Well, we're going to start disassembling the actual A-arms and whatnot. And the first thing I'm going to do is loosen this nut and see if I can get this part to break free. It's not crucial for what I'm currently doing, but it is going to help me later on when I service this. So hopefully I can get this to move and separate. If not, no biggie. So let's start by getting this cotter pin out. It's a little old and crusty. This is one thing that's going to take a little bit bigger of a socket. This is a 7/8, I believe. No, it's bigger. 15/16. Which I guess I don't have in shallow, only deep. Okay, yeah, that made pretty quick work. Okay, so that is unthreading. Now, this technically doesn't take the full weight of the spring, but it kind of does. So be careful removing this guy, because it could jump on you if it's loose. In theory, this pin actually goes, this bolt actually kind of rubs against that and will keep it from coming out, but you can't always trust that. And the reason I'm taking this apart now is because oftentimes this is a huge pain to take apart. Well, a huge pain to take apart, you know, not with a spring to help you. So we're going to flip that castle nut on there backwards. And once again, I'm going to hit that with a hammer. And you see that moved? So that's perfect. That's all I'm going to do. Next thing we're going to do is same sort of thing with this guy. So we're going to get that cotter pin out. And once again, this is all just because if it's rusty and crusty, I'd rather work with it when it has the mass of everything else than when it's kind of just in your hand. It might be moving a little bit. Hey, it's moving. Ow! Don't do that. Okay, well, I've got a little bit of a gap opening up right there, so I'm going to call that good. So now we're going to take kind of this whole thing apart and take this off kind of as an assembly. Okay, I almost forgot. Before I take all of this apart, we're actually just going to take the hubs out. It's going to be pretty basic and pretty easy. All we really got to do is just pull this cap. There's a few ways of doing it. You can do it like this with some, you know, channel locky type things, or the Harbor Freight knockoff Knipex. You can also drill a hole in here thread a little screw with the slide hammer and pull it off like that. Both work really well. But next thing we're going to do is take the cotter pin out. And if you have wire wheels and wire wheel hubs, this is a nightmare because you've got a big old tube in the way. And it's just a lot of keyhole surgery and kind of a pain. You know, having a bolt-on wheel, or a disc wheel as they call it, is a lot easier. And I'm just going to break this cotter pin because I'm not going to reuse it, and it's in my way. Cool. Now, this should be really tight. So, on a lot of hubs, a lot of American things, and on Triumphs, you set your bearing preload with this nut. On an MGB, and an MGA, and a Healy, or maybe not an MGA, but definitely an MGB and big Heelys, you use shims that are stopped. So it's almost like adjusting a pinion on a differential. More shims you have, the looser it is. The less shims you have, the tighter it is. We'll go over that when I do that video, but for now, we're going to take this apart and just don't lose the shims. So this guy takes 1 1/8 inches, and that was really loose. That shouldn't be, I mean, it was tight, but it wasn't like nearly as tight as it should be. It was like just past being loose. So this should actually be like cranked down. But pull that out. Pull our keyed washer out. Actually, just pull the whole thing out. So we got a keyed washer right there. Then we've got our outer bearing, and then we've got a bunch of shims sticking to that, and probably a few into that middle spacer tube. But I'm not going to deal with any of that until later. So we're just going to put this aside and focus on the other one. And if you're wondering, I'm not using this rotor. I've got brand new rotors. Though I guess you could probably turn it down, but really not worth it. So now it's time to take all this apart, get the spring out. So if you're doing this in the car, which is the better way of doing this, what you're going to want to do is jack up on the bottom of here, then pull this pin and let everything else flop down, and then gently lower it with the jack. The spring doesn't have all that much tension on it, so it's not too bad to just do that. You don't really need a spring compressor, though if you got one and you want to use it, by all means. But yeah, just let it down. Unfortunately, I don't have the weight of a car, so I'm going to do this in a little bit sketchier way, but it is the safest of the sketchy ways. I could also theoretically strap this down to something heavy and then do it like on a car, but the only thing I've got is the workbench, and I don't have a way of getting the jack up high enough. At least not in a way that's not also sketchy. So I'm going to get this on the ground and I'll show you how to pop this off. So essentially what we're going to do is just unbolt the shock. So we'll start with these two outer bolts, because they don't really matter that much, because they're not in tension. Now comes the slightly sketchy spot. So I'm going to put my weight on this cross member. I'm going to undo the shock. Now we got one left. I'm going to unbolt that last shock bolt. And what's going to happen is that this is going to flop over and this is going to lift up. So I'm going to keep my weight on it to keep it from jumping too far. Like I said, they're under spring force, but they're not under like a load of spring force. And actually, I think it's just about balanced. So I got my weight under there, and now you see that lifts up. And now I can unfold this. Yeah. And we can wedge that spring out. Yeah. All right. So that's one spring out. Now I'll do the other, and then it's just a matter of unbolting the A-arm. Okay, so there we go, fully stripped down, except for these bump stops, which is just a couple screws, so you don't need to see that. But yeah, so now I'm gonna go clean the crap out of this thing. I've got lots of chunks of mud to take off, some flaking paint, so yeah, just gonna clean that up and then shoot some paint on it. But that'll be for another time. So that's going to be all for today. I'll see you next time. Thanks for watching. You know, I didn't think that was going to be the hardest part.